I've known you a lot of years. And unfortunately for you, I kind of tallied up those years, and it comes to about a little more than 20. Tell me something, and it's a question I get a lot. What does a congressman do for the people of Burbank?
Well, as you point out, one of the most important parts of our job is its constituent service. It's a customer service oriented kind of responsibility. A lot of elected officials don't really understand that. They think it's all about legislating and passing bills, and they don't realize that fully half of the job is the day-to-day work in your district offices of helping people with the federal agencies, and it might be with immigration or Social Security or the Veterans Administration, helping people get the medicine they need from the VA. I like the fact that we're right across the street from City Hall, and I can look over and keep an eye on you, and you can keep an eye on me. But
okay, so you probably heard a word or two about us. What did you hear about me? what did anyone say
only
about
good
me?
stuff. Well, mostly good stuff. Okay, an occasional good thing.
So you're certainly aware, though, of all the other localities as well. I mean, I know you're at every parade and Memorial Day and 4th of July and that sort of thing. I'm sorry to let you know, Burbank, but he's not just seeing us.
No, but Burbank is my favorite, and it's a wonderful town. I love Burbank. I love the fact that we're in the heart of LA County, but nonetheless you feel like you're in the Midwest somewhere.
Absolutely.
Constantly you run into folks you know on the street, and it's a great town.
Is that a good thing that you constantly? Because a lot of people count on anonymity.
You know, anyone in my job who doesn't want to talk to their constituents or objects when they ask to be in a photo with them, they're in the wrong job. They're in the wrong job. It's a customer service job. I'll never forget when I ran for Congress in 2000. I was eating at a restaurant, and I got up to leave, and someone stopped me, and they said, "Are you Adam Schiff?" And I said, "Yes," and we shook hands. And he said, "I'm going to vote for you." And I said, "Thank you." And he turned to leave, and then he stopped, and he said, "But I have to admit, it's because I want to say I know my representative." And the mere fact that we had just met was enough of a connection. And it told me something important, that people want to feel connection to their representative. Ideally, they want to like him, but or agree with him on some or many things, but they do want to feel that connection. And if you're not around, or you're not willing to talk to people, or you shy away from them, you're not doing your job.
And as I probably already told you, I ran what I considered an unconventional campaign in that I walked a lot. I didn't spend any money, relatively, and I walked a lot. And I can't tell you how many times I heard, "Nobody's been up here since Adam Schiff." So.
When I was walking precincts, and I do it periodically now, continue to do it, but I used to hear when I knock on people's doors that no one had knocked on their door since Howard Berman or Alan Robbins. I heard some names that went back a long way in terms of ever representing part of Burbank.
Well, for you and for me, but they seem like yesterday, don't they? I want to indulge you my little theory, because first, you have to grant me the conventional theory about how you won in the first place. And I think the conventional theory is one of two things. The bad old NRA came in and spent a fortune, and it wasn't enough. And what really turned it around was registration to Democrats. It had long been rock Republican by definition.
When I first ran in the area, it was probably considered a lean Republican district, but it was a swing district. I think the key, for any candidate, either party, is always the same. It's being able to make the argument to voters about why you'll represent them well, whatever their party affiliation is. And I did the same thing you did. I walked door to door. I made the case. I didn't just walk to Democratic doors. I walked to Republican doors.
I've
And I
never
remember-
understood that, walking only to the doors of the party you represent. I mean, that's preaching to the choir.
It is. It is. I mean, you know, there are always efforts you need to make sure your people turn out, but at the same
sure.
time, in a competitive district, you need to be talking to everybody, and I remember people telling me on their doorstep, "Look, I'm a Republican, but I'm going to support you," or "I'm a Democrat, but I'm not voting for you just because you're a Democrat. I want you to do the right thing." And I think if you can persuade people that that's what you'll keep in mind, then they'll support you no matter what your party affiliation is. I learned a very important lesson at the Burbank Senior Center. When I ran in 1994, I ran unsuccessfully, and Prop 187 was a very powerful ballot measure that stirred a lot of emotion. I was against it, and I remember going to the Senior Center, and the last question I got was on that, and people were ready to tar and feather me. I knew my answer was not the answer they wanted to hear.
Back before it was really tarring and feathering like
Yes.
now. Yeah, it's,
But then I went back 2 years later, and I had a similar question about a equally kind of polarizing ballot measure, and I knew my answer wasn't going to be very popular. But I handled it differently, and I said, look, I'm against this ballot measure, and I know that's not what you want to hear, but if you just want someone who's going to come in here, tell you what you want to hear, I'm not your guy. And they applauded instead of tarring and feathering me, and it told me something important. People don't always need to agree with you. They do want to know that you have the courage of your conviction, and that you'll level with them.
and I think that's worth more than anything. It really is. If they are convinced that you'll stand up and you'll say something when it's time to be counted.
Well, and let me just say how much I appreciate the work you do and your colleagues, because the decisions you make impact people every day, right away, very tangibly, and that's hard, and it's also hard to work in a confined space with a small number of people. If there's somebody I don't get along with, there are 433 others where they came from. I don't have to spend all my time with them.
Tell me, do you have anybody funny in Congress?
Yes, one of my friends, I think is just hilarious. He's a guy named Derek Kilmer. He's from Washington State. He used to be with a consulting firm. One of my favorite stories about Derek is he was with this consulting firm before he was in Congress. He's on like the 15th floor of the building. There's a massive earthquake, and everybody's climbing under their desks. And Derek yells out, and this made history in the firm. He yelled out, "Please God, don't let me die at work." One of my colleagues, Juan Vargas, wonderful representative from San Diego area, he was a priest before he ended up leaving the church, and he had met his wife and left the church and got permission to marry. And but one of my favorite stories about Juan is as a young novitiate in the church, he was visiting the different Jesuit retreats, most of which are very bare bones and very simple and very plain. But he went to one that was actually quite nice, and the food was very good. And he joked to the other priests, he said, "Wow, if this is poverty, give me chastity." May indicate why he ultimately left the cloth. And,
No, that's too funny. That's too funny.
There are a number of my colleagues who are very funny.
You had one burden to overcome in your first election. That's sadly no longer a problem anymore, and that was the concern about name ID, because somebody else held your name, although it wasn't somebody in Washington nor here. Why don't you tell the folks about that?
Well, many of your viewers may know that there was a very popular TV show, I guess still is, Law and Order.
Dum dum. So you're all Netflix now. What do you mean? I guess there still is.
Well,
yes.
I have to confess I never really watched the show.
Oh.
Although when it started and they had this character of the Manhattan DA who was named Adam Schiff, and I had worked in the Manhattan DA's office, I certainly tuned in to find out whether he was a good candidate, a good character, or a bad character.
Sure.
And I always chuckle because the LA Times wrote this story about the similarity, of our names, but also that I was a prosecutor and the character was a prosecutor and that I'd worked in that office. And they asked the executive producer, Dick Wolf, was this character based on Adam Schiff? And he said no, they were just looking for a name that was both Jewish and aristocratic. And I told the LA Times that Dick Wolf had gotten it half right, and it wasn't the half with money.
Well, tell me, you are uniquely qualified in Congress, I believe anyway, to be leading an investigation these days that involves something that you actually have some background in, and that's Russian spies. Can you tell us a little bit about that background?
Well, I had the rare experience several years ago when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Los Angeles of prosecuting an FBI agent who was spying for the Soviet Union. He was seduced by an attractive KGB asset named Svetlana. They're always named Svetlana. And he was providing classified and national security information. And so my life does feel like it has come full circle because we have another case of Russian involvement, malevolent involvement in our country. And I'm also working closely with the FBI again and trying to conduct an investigation and determine just what did the Russians do and did they have help, and most importantly, what do we do to protect the country in the future, because it's kind of let the genie out of the box. What the Russians did here, they're also doing elsewhere, but not just the Russians now. I think many countries around the world are looking at each other and figuring out, can we help decide some other country's future? Are the Indians going to intervene in the Pakistani elections? And is Pakistan going to intervene in India's elections? And we saw what happened when the Gulf states have had a conflict over someone hacking into the news feed in Qatar, which is caused real division now between Qatar and Saudi Arabia and UAE.
Even South Asia, Africa, it just seems to be the thing to do to hack your neighbor.
Yeah.
That might have been Tom Lear's song if he'd sung it today.
That is true.
Why don't you go ahead and hack your neighbor? All right, listen, I want to thank you very much for the time. Always good getting back to you, and frankly, laughing at stories that you've got. So thank you. Thank you for the excellent service that I know Burbankers can count on from you. And you can be sure I'm not just saying that because I've been saying it for 20-some years. But it would be nice if you had a plaque or something for me.
We'll see what we can do.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
You too.